Hello, my friends, and welcome to my channel, Main's Mind. Today, I'm going to talk to you all about my artwork. I have been painting uh, for probably about 19 years, but it didn't start out that great. So, we're going to start with me telling you kind of how I got into painting. One of the things a lot of people make the mistake of thinking is that if you can't draw, you can't paint. And that's just not true. I can't draw very well. Matter of fact, this is what I'm currently working with. This right here. As you can see, this is not artistic at all. This is just a basic outline of what my concept is. But for some reason, when I paint, I have much more fun painting, and I'm able to get the shading and get the colors that I want when I paint that I can't seem to duplicate when I draw. So you don't have to be good at drawing to be able to paint. So well, let's say that first. Another thing is that there's many different types of painting. You've got those artists that are so amazing that they can paint pictures of people and things that look identical to the real thing. I mean, you look at it and you couldn't tell that it was a painting because it looks like a picture. Um, and then you've got those that paint like very abstract, where it's just a concept. It's multiple images strewn across a canvas, and it has meaning. People look at it and they draw meaning from it, but there's no real discernible images to it. I mean, that's a type of painting as well. So it depends on what kind of artwork you want to create. The one thing that I love with my artwork is that I can be creative with it. I can experiment with it. So I've always drawn little bits, drawn and sketched throughout my life. It wasn't until I had my kids that I really started to paint, and it was at their request. Mom, draw me this, draw me that. And it was originally just duplicating cartoon characters, Winnie the Pooh, Monster High, Tinkerbell. And then from there, I kind of progressed because I got interested in art. I enjoyed making the murals on their walls, and I decided I wanted to try to paint. Now, that being said, I am a self taught artist. I have not been to school, I have never had any formal training. I learned to paint by little tips that my dad would give me because he was an artist in his younger days, and YouTube. Gotta love YouTube. You can find everything on YouTube. And watching like old Bob Ross videos. So, I mean, I never had anybody like sitting there telling me, oh no, this is how you do it. This is the correct way to do it. I just kind of picked it up along the way. Now, before you actually get started painting, you will need some supplies, and we're going to talk about that next. Okay, brushes are something that everybody kind of worries about. What kind of brush should I have? How many brushes should I have? What types? Honestly, I'm a cheapskate. I'm not gonna lie. I go and I buy the cheapest brushes I can find. Usually those packages that have like 20, 30 brushes in it, and I work with those. Now, there are professional artists that really spend a lot of time on their brushes and maintaining them. I'm terrible with my brushes. I'm going to be honest. I use them until I can't use them anymore, and I get more. And I like to get the cheaper ones because they're easy to replace. I mean, with kids, they get them, they break them. They decide to go paint with their paints and don't clean them up right. And next thing you know, you're like, my favorite brush, and it's ruined. So I just go with the cheaper ones. Now, you will end up with your favorite brush because I think most artists have their favorite brushes, their go-tos. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to touch on it because I'll go into brushes a little bit more later. I always have this one. I like to paint a lot of animals. This is just a cheap little 1-inch brush. If you look at the bristles, let me see if you can see the bristles. They are really rough, and I like this because I can use it to paint hair, like the fur on animals. Uh, this is one of my smaller angled brushes. Let me see if you can see that. Yeah. So that's a smaller angled brush, and I like the angled brushes. One of my most favorite ones is this one, and as you can see, it needs to be replaced because it's already starting to get this weird dip in it. There are these brushes that are kind of rounded, and I keep these around. I don't really use these to paint unless I'm just brushing on color on like a big canvas and I'm just trying to quickly get the color on there so I can work out the background. I do use these also for that reason, but if they're dry, to help kind of blend the color in, and you'll see that process in a later video. And then there's also these brushes. They're fan brushes. And I have several of these fan brushes. Of these, this one right here again is probably one of my favorites because it is a rough brush. And so I can use this to kind of duplicate the color, I mean, the shape of hair. This one right here is a little finer. It's not one of my favorites because once I start applying paint to this, it just becomes really flimsy and it just doesn't give me the effect that I want. But there are these brushes, and there are the very, very tiny fine brushes as well. These smaller brushes, I actually did spring for these. In terms of money wise, they're Master's Touch, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see. See, that's a Master's Touch brand. And these are just some of my small brushes. I have smaller ones that are really thin. I use these when I'm like painting like eyes. I have to do something really small, like the dots in the eyes. You see in my eye how I have these three little dots. So if I'm painting something like that, I'll use these to add those little dots. Or I'll use them to kind of outline the eye if I need to add a darker color there. I use these for the little fine details. You do not need a palette knife. You can paint with just a brush. My first, again, I'm a cheapskate. My very first palette knives were these plastic ones. And I didn't like them. They drove me crazy. They do not bend very well. And so I almost never bought any more. But then I decided to go ahead and spring for the more expensive metal ones. And I love this one. This is probably my favorite. I have a whole collection, but this one right here is my favorite palette knife. And again, you'll see me using this in a later video. So painting surfaces. This one right here is where it gets interesting because you can paint on anything. The most common thing to paint on is canvas that you can buy at the store. And if you look, this one is white. This is just a little 8x10 canvas and it's white because it's been pre-treated. Pre-treated means that they've put some kind of primer on it that makes it white like this. If you flip it over, you can see the raw canvas. It's a lot grainier and darker and brown. This right here will absorb your paint, so it's a lot harder to paint on this. You can, but it's difficult and you're going to use a lot of paint. If you do buy them pre-bought from the store, these are actually not that expensive if you just buy the little 1 inch by whatever, and they usually sell them in bulk. Now the thing is though, you don't have to paint on canvas. I have painted on wood, I've painted on glass. I went to a garage sale and found an old mirror, a big mirror that had been broken, and I painted on the backboard and just reused the frame. So I'll post some of those images up for you here so you can see those. So as far as oil painting, the actual oil paints go, there's several different brands. The one I use, the one I started with, and I started with this one because it was like 20 bucks for a little box that had a complete set of these little tubes of Georgian paint. So this is the brand that I have used for the majority of the years. And I started out with the little thin tubes that came in the kit and just bought the kit. And then started to stockpile these. Whenever I had the extra money, I would go and buy a whole bunch. And so I had a whole bunch of these just for backup. So I haven't had to buy paint in a couple of years. Well, this year I started to run out of white paint. I'm running low on my white paint. See, this is my last tube of Georgian titanium white. So I went to the store the other day to get some more, and all I could find was Master's Touch. That's all I could find at the store. So I bought Master's Touch just because it was readily available to me. I will probably go online and look for the other ones because even though this one is good, I don't see a problem with it. It is taking longer to dry than my Georgian paint does, and it is not as grainy. So it's more smooth. And maybe, I mean, if that's what you like, that's fine. But I like that the Georgian has a grainier texture to it, and I like that it dries a lot faster. I love oil painting, and I respect that oil painting is going to take time to dry, but I'm also impatient and I want to keep painting, you know. Okay, now something to put your paint on. I mentioned I'm a cheapskate. I bought this nice palette a long time ago. But because, and I found out really quickly, let's see, that if you don't wash your paint off right away, it can kind of ruin it. So, but I don't want to have to keep replacing my palette. So I wrap it with aluminum foil because it doesn't bleed through. And when I'm finished, I can just rip it off and throw it away. And I can reuse this until I don't need to use it anymore. So I replace it probably every time I'm getting ready to paint, and then I just use it for the duration of that piece. And as you can see, I've been working on a piece. So this one's got some paint on it, and it's been there for about a day, so it's still wet. Oil paint doesn't dry really quickly. So, you know, if you're going to leave it there longer, then it will start to dry out on you, but for the most part. And then you're going to need some kind of paint thinner. I don't like paint thinner. I don't like the odor. I like to paint inside. So what I use is mineral spritz. But again, I did have an actual jar that had the little nice metal coil on the inside. But I broke the jar, and I just so happened to have an empty salsa jar, and I thought, oh, that would fit, and it did. And so I've been using this, and I've used it for probably about a decade now. I do change this out every now and then. But this is, I just put my mineral spritz in here and I use that. But again, you don't have to. You can have a little cup with mineral spritz or paint thinner or odorless, you know, thinner that they sell, and you would use that to clean your brushes or thin your paint. And that's what I use it for. So those are just your basic supplies that you would need to get started with your oil painting. And if you're just starting out, you don't need to go running buy canvas. You don't need to go buy the most expensive. If you look at this, it said it's $14.99. I got this big old tube on sale for 50% off. But they do sell little kits that are like 20-30 bucks, and it comes with a whole array of colors, and that's good enough to get you started. And they sell canvas paper if you want to work on that, or you could just grab an old painting in your house and paint over it if you want. You can paint on anything to get you started. Though it's important is that you get started, because you don't learn how to do this unless you start. It's one thing to want to do it. It's another thing to experiment and be ready to fail, and that's okay. You have to fail in order to improve. So hopefully that'll help you get started with the oil painting. I am going to be completing a series on my YouTube channel. So join me so I can show you my tips and tricks for oil painting. I'll do different videos in my series. I am currently working on a piece, so you will see me working on that piece in some of these videos as well as, you know, tips and tricks that I use when I'm painting to help me achieve my desired looks. Okay, so if you have questions or comments, please comment below. And please don't forget to like and subscribe my channel. I'll see you all next time.